and making himself known in the wake of the crucifixion and the resurrection. Coming to visit his friends. It goes like this. When it was evening on that day, the first day of the week, and the doors of the house where the disciples had met were locked for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." After he had said this, he showed them his hands and his side. Then the disciples rejoiced when they saw the Lord. And Jesus said to them again, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I send you." When he'd said this, he breathed on them and said to them, "Receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive the sins of any, they are forgiven them. If you retain the sins of any, they are retained." But Thomas, who was called the twin, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We've seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands, and put my finger in the mark of the nails, and my hand in his side, I will not believe." A week later, his disciples were again in the house, and Thomas was with them. Although the doors were shut, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." And he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Do not doubt, but believe." And Thomas answered him, "My Lord and my God." Jesus said to him, "Have you believed because you've seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have come to believe." Now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written so that you may come to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, Son of God, and that through believing you may have life in his name. So ends the reading of God's holy word. Let us pray. Eternal God, we are your Easter people, and so we move into this very special season of joy and celebration, listening to this particular story, on one level a very ordinary one, about Jesus joining his friends again, and yet so extraordinary because of this new life and this new resurrection and new calling. May we find within this story blessings for our life. We ask this in your holy name. Well, there's nothing wrong with blind faith if that happens to be your gift. Blind doesn't necessarily mean ignorant faith, just faith that is alive in one's heart, even when the evidence is either contrary or entirely lacking. And I don't disparage folks who possess that kind of faith. I just don't often have it. See, I am the victim of a dark conspiracy, doubly cursed to forever scam the universe for proof of God. Why do I say that? Well, first of all, on all legal documents, I am known not as Tim, but as Thomas, creating an immediate affinity for our doubting disciple. And secondly, I share a birthday with none other than Harry S. Truman, perhaps the most illustrious son of the show-me state of Missouri. So I am therefore twice afflicted with the virus of empiricism. I want proof, and I'm a little bit unrepentant about it. In defense of our so-called doubting Thomas friend, he was, after all, simply asking for the same consideration that his friends had enjoyed the week before, where Jesus appeared and showed the marks of tribulation to probably an equally incredulous group. Thomas just wanted the same privilege. That same fierce spirit of justice that was in Thomas can be found all over the landscape of our lives. Think about this example. There is a reason that parents of kindergartners are very careful to send enough cupcakes into the schoolroom so that every child can celebrate little Lisa's birthday. To have 17 children diving into their cupcakes while one child sits with a saltine simply will not do. Wars have started over less than that. Thomas wanted his chance, his cupcake, and he got it. He was shown the marks by the risen Christ, even if he did incur a little bit of a stern lecture from Christ about faith. Perhaps the day will come when Jesus and Thomas and I can all sit down over a cafe mocha and hash this out a little bit. But I'm not going to rush the season. Meantime, I will continue to look for the marks, for the proof. Which begs the question, just what do we mean when we speak of the marks? In Jesus' case, it was pretty clear. We're talking about holes, piercings of the flesh that reveal that this was indeed the one who was crucified and who now lives and breathes on each of us, the empowering Spirit. The marks are signs of suffering, to be sure, but signs of authenticity as well. Thomas could look at the marks and say, that's the guy. That's the one who embodies God. I know by the marks. There's no doubt about it. My Lord and my God. This may come as a surprise to some of us, but the marks are still very much in evidence today. Sometimes. Now, in this era of almost insane body piercing, most of us, even so, seldom encounter someone with a pierced palm, hopefully. But that doesn't mean we don't encounter folks with wounds. They may be wounds from years ago, they may be wounds from last night. Some of these wounds carry kind of an immediate sense of nobility, as when we see a veteran down on the basketball court in Bloomfield playing basketball with a prosthesis or two. But other wounds, or marks, are less noble. They are the internal wounds of the heart that may come from a broken relationship, or an addiction, or a bad choice, or a moment of indiscretion. We don't usually get the Purple Hearts for these wounds. And yet they can bring heroic lessons if we allow them to. If you ever have too much time on your hands, I encourage you to try this little exercise. I would suggest a place of ample light, perhaps a magnifying glass. But just take a few moments to inspect your hands. They tend to tell a story. One of my fingers still bears the fairly faint mark, but a discernible mark, of a tussle that I had with a paint scraper. The score of that game was paint scraper 1, finger nothing. Some folks, their hands may tell more serious stories. Some people are simply missing digits. Some people have a place on their finger where it looks like there may have been a ring. A ring that symbolized love. A love that was either lost or yanked away. The marks on our hands are as unique as our own stories, but what is universal is that we have them. Our hands have them, our souls have them. And there isn't a Revlon product on earth that can cover up those marks completely. And thank God. Because contrary to that part of us that wants to cover up our marks and to look like we have it all together, Our marks are actually gifts. They reveal our vulnerability, our humanity, and our mutual need for God. Is it a coincidence that the same Jesus who sported these wounds was able to breathe upon the disciples with unimaginable power of the Spirit? This is one of those crazy places in our whole faith story, and in a way that never makes sense. That the cross brought victory, that the least shall be greatest, that in death there's life. It's really pretty nuts, at least in the eyes of the world. But that's not the way with God. Why is it we rarely ask other people about their strength, about their non-wounds? Gee, Fred, how much did you say you could bench press? Or gosh, Margie, your IQ is 140 what? Or Bill, what was your net worth? We don't ask questions like that, not normally. That's not where we meet. Because those places of strength really aren't all that strong. They're fleeting, they're relative, and they don't invite communion. Not the way the marks do. Why is it that we gravitate to the one person in the room, who's willing perhaps to break that awkward silence with an honest question about something? What makes rabbits and little puppies so inviting? Or babies, why do we flock to them? We find conversation easier to start. I think in part it's because we're people who crave communion and want to meet in places of mutual vulnerability, where it's safe enough to be fully ourselves, to reveal that yes, we too struggle, need compassion, understanding, and frankly can't go it alone. How is it that 20 centuries later we're still rallying around this guy who never made it to the summit of worldly power, didn't have a pot to cook in, and couldn't even conquer a 2-bit Roman outstation? It's the insanity of the cross, craziness of the gospel, that in our weakness, in his weakness, individually, collectively, we find enormous strength. I'm going to conclude with this story, which I have shared before, I've got to confess. But it's just so appropriate as it speaks to how vulnerability draws forth vulnerability and creates an incredible bond. So, if we can all get through it, we will. This is how it goes. You've heard it. You've probably seen this. A store owner was tacking a sign above his door that read, "Puppies for sale." Soon a little boy appeared under the store owner's sign. "How much are you going to sell those puppies for?" the little boy asked. The store owner replied, "Anywhere from 30 to 50 bucks. The little boy reached into his pocket and pulled out some change. "I have $2.37. "May I please look at them?" The store owner smiled and whistled, and out of the kennel came a dog named Lady with 5 little balls of fur in tow behind her. One puppy was lagging considerably behind, and immediately the little boy singled out that lagging, limping puppy and said, "What's wrong with that little dog?" The store owner explained that the veterinarian had examined this little puppy and discovered that it didn't have a hip socket. It would always limp, and it would always be lame. The little boy became excited. "That's the puppy I want." The store owner said, "You don't want that little dog. If you really want him, I'll give him to you." And the little boy got indignant. He looked straight into the store owner's eyes and pointed his finger and said, "I don't want you to give him to me. That little dog is worth every bit as much as all the other dogs, and I'll pay full price. In fact, I'll give you $2.37 now and 50 cents a month until I have it paid for it." And the store owner countered, "You really don't want to buy that little dog. He's never going to be able to run and jump and play with you like the other puppies. And to the store owner's surprise, the little boy reached down and he rolled up his pant leg to reveal a badly crippled, twisted leg supported by a brace. And he looked up at the store and softly replied, "I don't run so well myself." And the little puppy will need somebody who understands. We all have the marks. They're marks of pain, but they're also marks of incredible power for the building of souls and for the building of the body of Christ. Thanks be to God.